Hi, everyone. I'm Ian Fisher. I'm joined by Elizabeth Heaton, all the way on the other side of the country. We're doing our final video in today's series about COVID-19 and the effects on the college admissions landscape. And we wanted to take this last video to talk a little bit about uncertainty.
Yeah.
Uncertainty, I think, is one of the big words that are a buzz out there, for everyone on so many different planes, and sort of thinking about how that affects college admission is something that we want to be able to provide answers for families that we work with, but I think there's a lot that we can't totally talk about just yet because we don't know. But anyway, we're going to talk about it. So first of all, I think we just off the air, we're talking about summer programs. And we always talk about the importance of having a productive summer. Students are maybe getting a part-time job, they're doing a summer camp, they're going to an institution to do a summer class of some kind. These haven't been canceled just yet, but they may be. What would you recommend for students who are sort of looking ahead to what their summer activities will hold?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm suggesting to students is simply see if you can develop a plan B that doesn't involve leaving your house, which sounds like a terrible way to spend your summer. And I can tell you, I'm not excited about that.
Yeah.
But I think for right now, not a bad idea. And we'll do another video and maybe talk more in depth or a segment on the podcast where we talk more in depth about ideas. But some examples might be a student who was going to do some work with a professor. This is actually a true example. And was going to physically be on the college campus all summer long, working directly with the professor. They're now thinking about, okay, if you can't be here, here's how we'll work on this remotely, because the work that she's doing doesn't actually require her to be there in person. My son is meant to travel to Europe and do an immersion program. I don't think that's going to happen. So one of the things he's doing right now is some Duolingo stuff where he is trying to get ahead in the French, and maybe he will do something a little more intensive that is online. But suggestions like that, where you can just be doing something that's of interest. I know that some places have online cooking classes. You could do music lessons online. There's a lot of stuff these days that can happen virtually. And so,
Yeah.
you don't need to commit to anything yet, but knowing that it's a possibility means that at the very least, your summer won't be completely, just you sitting in a room playing video games, which I
That's
think
right.
would bore anybody.
It would.
Yeah.
And I'll put in a plug there for our radio show that's airing a week from Thursday, where we are going to talk about some ways that students can spend their downtime at home. And some of the ideas that we'll discuss there are not just relevant for right now, but also summer, if this sort of isolation period extends into the summer.
Yeah.
But let's get a little bit crazy here and speculate on some things that are happening.
Crazy.
Just one of the things that a colleague mentioned to me is it may be that freshmen coming up in the fall might not be starting their freshman year on a college campus because campuses will not have reopened in time for that enrollment. And what does that mean for students who are, expecting to have this great college experience, basically starting their classes online from their childhood homes? Are there any sort of expectations about how that might affect enrollment targets for admissions offices? Are students going to embrace that? By then, will it be the new normal? I don't know. What do you think that potential decision might have? What impact might that bring?
Yeah. Great question. I think one of the things you and I were talking about is the idea that we might see some students for whom it's still financially very feasible to go to these schools decide to just defer for a year, right? Say, you
Yeah.
know what? I want the true college experience. If I'm going to pay $75,000 plus dollars, I want to be on campus all 4 years. And therefore, I'll just find something to do with my time during that first year where maybe the first semester will not be on campus. And so what we might see is a large number of students larger number than usual, students who are admitted decide to ask for a gap year.
Right.
And actually, Jen Simons and I talked, not last week, but the week before, maybe last week, I'm not sure, on the podcast about gap years. This
Right.
was not even a shadow of a thing at that point. So we didn't address this piece. But, from your perspective as a former admissions officer, what's the impact to a college if that many students defer?
Well, it's a huge impact because it changes the number of seats that are already filled in an incoming class. And so if, typically if you have 5, 10 students defer, it's not a meaningful number, right? So that helps with your enrollment guarantees. You have those seats, and so you're going to fill the rest. But if you see a significant percentage of seats that are filled for the year after next, that is really going to affect selectivity at that school because they don't have to have nearly as many students admitted to fill those same number of seats. It changes, I think, a lot about what this current junior class's admissions will look like. And then there's also, in terms of the gap year, one of the things that people really love to do for gap years is different kinds of international travel programs that are typically social out there. You're getting experiences, and those might not exist. And so
Yes.
I wonder about colleges approving gap years where really the description of the activity is I'm going to stay home because everybody's staying home right now. We always approved gap years because students were doing something interesting in that period of time that was part of the letter that requested that deferral. And I don't know what students might, have an opportunity to do in the coming year if colleges are not open in person. I think it will have effects elsewhere as well. Go ahead.
One thing that sort of goes along with this, I'm on a Facebook group with a number of other people who are in this industry, and someone put forth the suggestion and admitted that this was, they realized, a bit of a dream, but that in light of everything that's going on and the likelihood that students may not be able to visit campuses, that colleges eliminate ED for the year. And while I don't disagree with the sentiment behind it, my reaction to that was, I think we're going to see more ED than we have in the past, right? So I believe that those colleges who do offer early decision are going to be looking to fill at least as much, if not more, of their class in early decision this coming year because of the uncertainty that we're going to see in this graduating class of 2020, that it could be for those students who can afford to apply ED, always a big thing, right?
Big thing,
that we may see colleges being a little bit more generous with their admissions in ED because they don't know what's coming. And that makes any enrollment manager nervous, right? If you don't know how you're going to fill your class, if it's going to look different than it has in the past, and you're not quite sure how to deal with that, the one tool you have is ED, where you are virtually guaranteeing a certain percentage of the students you admit are 100% yield.
And you might see that colleges want to use it more, but families want to use it less because of the uncertainty. And so all of a sudden, there's a desire to fill a certain number of spaces with very little supply in terms of qualified students. And so I wonder what that might look like. I think you're also, there's a potential issue with so many cancellations that are happening this spring. Science fairs are being canceled, national debate tournaments, all of these things that students in the past had participated in to get recognition, to put it on their activities list, sports seasons, whatever it may be. I don't think that that's necessarily going to be, it certainly is not going to be held against students to not participate. But for those students who have typically been near the top in those areas, they no longer have that as a differentiator. When they're applying to college in the fall, they can't say national champion debate 2020 because that didn't exist in 2020. And so there might be, in some sense, a flattening of the admissions pool, given that there are fewer of these peaks of students who are standing out in a really significant way. There are few opportunities to do interesting kinds of activities in the spring because they're being shut down. And so I wonder what that impact is going to look like for the admission process and for how students separate themselves from other students in their pool.
Yep, exactly. And then when we couple that with the uncertainty around testing, some of the ways in which students would typically kind of rise to the top may go away a little bit for this upcoming junior year class. And so
we might see that
impact
there. I think, the other thing is that we're sort of a lot of the conversation is around some of the more highly selective schools and what their approach is going to be. I do think that what you're going to see outside of that group is colleges that really want to be secure in what their incoming class is. And so I would expect that you're going to see less selectivity among schools that are not the top tier, but maybe the upper middle in terms of selectivity. Schools that admit between 25 and 50% typically might be a little bit more generous in terms of what they're kind of looking for. So, there are always these different effects depending on what schools are admitting. And I think that, this might sound like, oh, doom and gloom, like how do I actually stand out? But I think that outside of a handful of institutions, there are still some really meaningful ways to stand out. And I don't know, students have to think a little bit about how they're going to do that from their home.
Right.
But I think that there are some ways to make that happen. Any other thoughts about what students, I mean, we're going to talk about this on an upcoming podcast, what students can be doing now. Is there anything else that sort of is uncertain for you, or that students can be doing to shore up some of that uncertainty at this time?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that comes to mind, and it has nothing to do with uncertainty, but is that one piece of advice that I would have is for juniors who kind of maybe don't have much going on right now, you could start working on your college essay. Let me give you all one big piece of advice. Probably don't want to write about this. Don't write about COVID-19.
Please don't.
Because I am going to guarantee you that everywhere you go, students are thinking, oh, I'm going to write about this. This is a nightmare, right? I can't believe all these interruptions, and that tendency is going to be very, very, very strong to want to write about this. But everybody is going to want to write about it. And one of the ways in which you can stand out in this process is by choosing a different path from everyone else. So remember that before COVID-19, you had hopes, dreams, aspirations, and interests.
That's right.
And ideally, you will have them after COVID-19. And therefore, please, you could find something different to write about.
Yeah, I was thinking about writing about this, like writing a little bit of a running diary of what's happening here. So it is absolutely a popular topic to write about. And man, I can imagine being an admission officer who's just beating their head against the wall, like another day 3 of quarantine, kind of essay approach. So
exactly.
Absolutely, I would say avoid that. I will point out that the Common App essay prompts are not changing for next year. So they are out there. They are determined. And so you can write an essay that fits those prompts now if you want to get started. Beth, there is so much more for us to talk about on this front. I think we wouldn't have even thought a week ago we would be having the conversations we're having now. And 2 weeks ago, certainly, it's just things change dramatically. And so we want to be able to come to you all as often as we can when we have new information and can provide that for you. Beth, thank you for taking the time this afternoon to do that. Thank you all for listening. And we hope to be able to speak to you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Ian. Appreciate it.
Thanks all.